The Weapon of a Jedi, a Luke Skywalker adventure, is the third and final children's book released with the Journey to the Force Awakens banner on it. It was written by Jason Fry with art by Phil Noto, who also did art in the first couple of volumes of the Poe Dameron series, and I know I said I'd save Luke's story for last, but I figured I haven't had a good Luke story in ages, why not read his first? And just like the Leia book that went alongside this one, it's absolutely fantastic. I really can't understand why Disney managed to nail the characters and lore in these books before Episode 7 was released, then decided to shit all over them. The format of the book is the same as the Leia one, with the story being set up just before The Force Awakens, but retelling a story from the past in the OT era. This time it's Jessica Parva, the X-Wing pilot from the Poe comics, who has the problem of keeping her astromechs alive, being told a story about Luke by 3PO, and just like the others, it's split into 3 parts, with each part having a nice piece of art at the beginning to showcase a scene from that section of the book. The basic story is this. Luke starts to get feelings from the Force calling him, and he's sent to collect some data for the rebels from a planet, but his Y-Wing, yes I said Y-Wing, becomes damaged, and before he can complete his mission he lands on a planet to get repairs, and that's the planet the Force had been calling him to. There he finds a Jedi temple that he'd been having visions of, hires a guide to take him there, and once he's there spends a couple of days inside, get this, training with some remotes. Rey, you listening Rey? Continuing to practice the lessons Ben had taught him on the Falcon. The Empire turns up, tries to capture Luke, he fights them off, the guide he hired turned on him, Luke beats him, and it's a happy ending, which is exactly what you expect from a kid's book. The story itself is fine, if basic, but just like the other two, it's a children's book and it's not fair to expect Thrawn trilogy levels of storytelling in a book with this demographic in mind. Having said that, there were loads of things in this book that I loved. I liked how Luke continued practicing what Ben had taught him. This to me is the logical step that should be taken for his character. None of this suddenly being able to do anything and everything perfectly like Rey. Luke here is practicing, and it's none of that moving noodles crap we got in Heir to the Jedi either. And this is why Disney defenders are wrong. They say, well, if we call Rey a Mary Sue, Luke must be a Mary Sue too. It's like, no, we see Luke practice. We saw it in Empire Strikes Back. We also see it here. Rey has never once practiced. Luke's literally practicing how to let go of his emotions so he can learn to listen and connect with the Force, and this to me is exactly how it should be with Luke, and Fry's description of the Force is exactly what it would be in Legends, so I approve. So this little bit of story explains how Luke manages to cool his lightsaber in the Wampus Cave in Empire Strikes Back. It doesn't retcon the movies, instead it fits in nicely with the pre-established lore and events, and that's how things should be, not constantly being rewritten. And for anyone who listens to my reviews and thinks I'm a Disney hater, I'm not. When they get it right, I will praise them, and this is a Disney book. They got it right. It's just a shame that there's like 2 or 3 that are like this, and then the rest of them are just bollocks. However, while there's none of that crap about Luke having to lose a love before he can connect to the Force, like in Heir to the Jedi, which showed Kevin Hearn has a severe lack of understanding of the Star Wars universe, by the way, it does mean that we now have 2 stories explaining how Luke first managed to use the Force after A New Hope. And they can't both be right, they can't both be the first time. So which one is correct? Heir to the Jedi was released first, and it's an adult novel, but this story is so much better. There's no flying toast. So there's a continuity mess created, but I'd take this version over Heir to the Jedi any day. And that's a children's book. I would take a children's book over Heir to the Jedi, which is an adult's book. That's how bad Heir to the Jedi is. Honestly, who thought noodles and burnt toast was Star Wars? Should be noted, Kevin Hearn thanked Chuck Wendig for helping him with lore in that book. How interesting. There's also a quote from episode 1 which I liked, since Qui-Gon taught Obi-Wan, and as Luke's training he thinks to himself, don't censor on your anxieties, keep your concentration here and now where it belongs. This makes sense to me. It's not magic, it's not fan service. Qui-Gon taught Obi-Wan, and he in turn taught Luke, a small amount but enough to get him going, and this was clearly one of the things, and I like how it ties the OT and PT together. There's another prequels reference, and I really like this one because of the implications it has, where R2 says about 3PO switching heads with one of the battle droids found on the planet, and 3PO says R2 has a twisted sense of humour, and R2 just sniggers knowingly like he's the only one in on a joke, and it really gave me a lift because in episode 2 we see 3PO switch heads with the battle droid and it's R2 that pulls his head off it. What's the implications of this though? Well, it means that R2 definitely didn't have a memory wipe at any point between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, so he must know who Obi-Wan is and could piece together who Luke is. So it makes me wonder how exactly, if they even try to, which I doubt they will, how they'll fix this. I know it's an old argument, but this confirms R2 remembers the prequels, whereas before Disney it was only a possibility and never confirmed. Of course, it's been 4 years since this was written, so I don't think Disney or Hidalgo give a shit. I don't know why I think they might at this point in time, but it is something that needs to be addressed. It won't be, but it needs to be. And that right there pretty much sums up Disney Star Wars. We need to do this? Meh. Literally, the page after that, we hear Luke close his saber with a snap hiss, which is exactly how they described it in Legends, and it's been so long since Luke has been in a book. The last one I read was Heir to the Jedi, and that was fucking awful, and that was like 3 years ago, and I read it about 2 or 3 years after it was released. That just seeing the words on the page, Luke lightsaber snap hiss, gave me a thrill. Honestly, it reminded me of being a kid reading the expanded universe. The sound was always described as a snap hiss there, although in Legends it was hyphenated, here it isn't. So I think it's fantastic. It's the smallest thing ever, but it's the little moments that give you lifts like that in Star Wars books. So overall, I really liked this book. It didn't have the depth of an adult novel, but again, it's aimed at kids, and it does make up for that by having some really good lore that fits perfectly with the movies, something Disney are struggling to do every day. You know how in Legends, Shadows of the Empire perfectly bridged Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi? It didn't retcon a single thing, and it explained a lot. This is kinda like that, but on a much smaller scale. So I'd recommend this book to anyone who wants one last good story about Luke Skywalker, and I'd recommend all 3 of these books. I mean, I haven't read the Han one yet, but I mean, the first 2 were just fucking brilliant, because they're all true to the OT characters and the OT lore and the OT events. No retcons, no making bullshit up, just the OT characters being true to their on-screen selves in stories that would easily fit in Legends. Why can't we have adult books like these today? What's happened at Disney for them to release these nearly perfect books, then spaz out the way they did and turn on the OT characters? I have no idea, but I'm thankful these books were made before they did.